Good morning, everyone. This morning, I'd like to do a little reading before my talk. Uh, and this talk will be from the book Swampland Flowers, The Letters and Lectures of Zen Master Taohe. Uh, Robert, now Sensei Robert, sent this book to me a few years back. He said he thought some of the things I was telling him sounded like Taohe, so he got me the book. And I'd heard of Taohe before, but I hadn't read this book. And what's kind of interesting about him as a teacher is, uh, while he started around the same age that I did at age 17, only he became a, uh, a monk I think a year or two after that. Uh, he was a Chinese master who lived right after around the year 1000 in China, which would have been roughly around the time Dogen lived, little bit before perhaps. And at that point, the golden age of Zen, as it's normally considered, was hundreds of years before. So we kind of think of China and all these masters as living, of course, to us, ancient times, at least 1,000 years ago, if not more. But to them, a lot of the Zen teachers that they were reading were hundreds of years old before them, like as old as the founding of our country is to us. So there's a very, very long history there, um, which I find kind of interesting. So before I read what he said in this letter, and he taught a lot via correspondence, which I find interesting because that is something that's also pretty rare in ancient times. There are a few examples of letters that other masters sent to students, but it's pretty rare. Uh, what I'm going to actually read is his death poem. It was kind of common in this era, you see it in Japanese then too, to write a poem upon your death. A lot of these guys evidently knew when they were going to die. And so I'll read this. Uh, it was 1163 on the ninth day of the eighth month, after showing signs of illness, when Dahui told the congregation of monks, nuns, and lay people, "Tomorrow I'm going." I'm taken off. Towards the pre-dawn hours, after he'd written his last bequest and a letter to the emperor was a personal friend of his, actually. The monk who was his attendant asked Tawe for a verse. In a serious voice, he said, "Without a verse, I couldn't die." And then he took up the brush and wrote, "Birth is thus, death is thus, verse or no verse, what's the fuss?" Which I really love because it rhymes in English as the same as Chinese, evidently, or ancient Chinese. Thought that was really. And I think that when you see this, when you listen to this passage, which was a letter to one of his students, you'll kind of get a flavor of that too. So this was a letter that Tawe wrote to Li Mao Chia, and it's called "Who is in the Way." So these men were corresponding back and forth, just to let you know. So he's talking at first about the letter he received from Mao Chia. Your letter informs me that your root nature is dim and dull, so that though you make efforts to cultivate and uphold the Dharma, you've never gotten an instant of transcendent enlightenment. The one who can recognize dim and dull is definitely not dim and dull. Where else do you want to seek transcendent enlightenment? After all, gentlemen of affairs who study this path must depend on their dimness and dullness to enter. But if you hold to dimness and dullness, considering yourself to be without the qualifications for the path, then you're being controlled by the demons of dimness and dullness. Since those with commonplace understanding often make the intention of seeking transcendent enlightenment into an obstacle set before them, their own correct understanding cannot appear before them. And this obstacle does not come from outside. It's nothing else but the boss man who recognizes the dimness and dullness. So, who's your boss man? Thus, when Master Juyen was dwelling constantly in his room, he would call to himself, Boss, and also respond to himself, Yes, be alert. I will. Hereafter, don't fall for people's deceptions. I won't. Fortunately, since ancient times, there have been such models. Just arouse yourself right here and see what it is. The one who does the arousing isn't anyone else. He's just the one that can recognize dimness and dullness. And the one who recognizes dimness and dullness isn't anyone else. He's your own fundamental identity. This is me giving medicine to suit the disease, having no other alternative. Briefly pointing out the road for you to return home and sit in peace, and that's all. If you stick to dead words and say it really is your fundamental identity, then you're acknowledging the conscious spirit as yourself. And this has even less to do with it. Therefore, Master Cha Sha said, people studying the path don't know the truth. It's just because they've always accepted the conscious spirit. Thus, the root of birth and death over immeasurable ages, fools call the original man. What I said before about depending on dimness and dullness to enter is this. Simply see what the one who can know dimness and dullness like this ultimately is. Just look right here. Don't seek transcendent enlightenment, just observe and observe. Suddenly you'll laugh aloud. Beyond this, there's nothing that can be said. The master, yeah, Dawei wrote it. So he was responding to a student who was in his letter saying that that he felt he was dim and dull and couldn't comprehend the awakened mind. So one thing I really love about this particular passage, and also what he quoted uh, about boss, yes, are you awake? Yes, I am. It's translated a little differently in, I think it's the Mumonkan where that one appears, where that koan appears, and it says, Master, yes, you awake. So what I like about it and about what he says here is it's very consistent, and maybe this is why Robert thought I should read this. Uh, Very consistent with the notion of different parts of ourself functioning in different ways and how we have to become aware of those parts. And in the initial letter that this his student sent to Tawe, he's in parts work parlance, he's giving in to the inner critical voice. The inner critical voice is telling me, I'm such an idiot, I'm so dumb, I'm so dense, I'm so unenlightened, I cannot understand this amazing I can't have this amazing experience that everyone's expressed. And what I also find interesting about this passage is Dawei was the heir to the Linchi or Rinzai school, uh, which was the sudden enlightenment school. And yet, a lot of his teaching in this book, the letters that he wrote to students or responded to letters that students wrote, uh, he sounds a lot like Dogen or someone along those lines. So, which is not inconsistent with what I've found over the years, which is that when people reach a certain stage in practice, they're kind of talking about the same thing. no matter whether it's a sudden enlightenment school or what was called the gradual enlightenment school. The other thing to know about Da Wei, and that relates to why I wanted to speak about him today and relate it to what's going on with some people that I talk to in my role as a teacher, is there were several political upheavals during the time when he was practicing and teaching. At that time, uh, the northern Chinese, who were essentially nomadic tribes from the north that had Mongol and other tribes that had conquered northern China, were in on the verge of conquering southern China. And so there was a lot of political unrest, and he had to actually move where he was several times to avoid it. This was during an era where a lot of the practitioners of Zen were in the kind of aristocratic, educated class. And it's somewhat reflected in the language that the teachers used of this era. It's much more of a intellectual process, I think. But the essential points are still there. So in the work that I do, I talk to a lot of people, uh, and even just among the students that I have, which amounts to about 30 people, there's always something going on, some kind of difficult situation that people are encountering. Um, Death of a loved one, death of a loved pet, um, painful health situations, diseases and chronic pain, uh, financial reversals, uh, psychological distress. This is what we encounter in this practice, our own and others. And the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, which is not 100% over, by the way, there's people still dying from COVID, but the main part of it, of course, is over, was an excellent time to practice. It certainly wasn't an excellent time for humanity, uh, but diseases have and plagues have always existed in humanity. As soon as people started living together in large groups, there were diseases, pandemics. So this is nothing new. Financial reversals, health issues, death of loved ones, nothing new. This is the way life works. And at times we may feel it's unfair to us, but it's just what is. So at that point, we have a decision to make when we're in a difficult situation. Do we continue to practice with it? Or do we kind of give into it and just give into the pain or give into the despair and give into the suffering? A few people that have given talks recently have spoken of the notion of the second arrow, the third arrow. The first arrow, of course, being all these things I'm talking about, the first arrows of disease, old age, and death, of loss, because everything's always changing. We can't hold on to anything indefinitely or even for very long. All those things are the first arrows, and there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them. That's why personally I've never felt the need to try and make the practice more difficult than it needs to be, whether it's being austere or making people not be able to wear socks in the winter. We were talking about that earlier. Some Zendos, you can't wear socks, and they're cold. The floor in here is quite cold. Dave's barefoot, but he's a polar bear, and everyone else has socks on today. We've had some cold weather lately. Yeah, he's practicing with cold feet, which we all are a little bit. So I've never seen the need to make the practice more difficult because to quote Joe Biden, guess what? It's difficult enough, especially as we get older. And oddly enough, most of us are. We're all getting older. There's the attendant aches and pains and issues. So the main point of what I'm trying to get at is what Dawei is saying here is kind of what I've been talking about the last year or so when I've been doing talks about getting in touch with who or what is it that is experiencing the dullness, experiencing the pain, experiencing doubt about can I do it? Can I achieve it? It's that part that wants to achieve something that is the problem. And traditional Zen works with it in a different way than we're doing it here, to be honest. And a lot of the way I trained early on was kind of more in a traditional Zen manner. And the traditional Zen manner was to make it incredibly difficult, physically, psychologically, to cut everything out from under you, everything you think you knew or could hold on to. And you would, of course, start out traditionally, back in Asia by giving up everything that you had physically, giving up all of your possessions. And then from there, you would go into the other stuff. But we don't do that in lay practice. In lay practice, we have to work with what we are, with our particular situations as they are. And again, I find that there's plenty there. There's plenty there to work with. There's plenty of greed, anger, and ignorance in the world and in our lives to work with. Plenty that we generate to work with. And so, again, going back to the notion of the arrows, are we fully experiencing what arises and practicing with it and moving through it and moving on? Or are we shooting ourselves many other times with many other arrows? In between the arrows that we get shot by in life, there is there is also joy, beauty, uh, bliss, all the other stuff that goes along with life when we're not so attached and we're not so uh, concerned with things we can't control. When Dawi wrote this death poem, he was totally one with the fact that he was going to die. He even knew he was going to beforehand, which a lot of these guys evidently did. There's records of it anyway. He just felt it was time to go. I think he was 75, they said, or six when he died, so only a few years older than me right now. Dogen was considerably younger than me when he died. Um, so it could happen anytime. We have to realize that anytime. So the arrows that we shoot are the arrows of judgment, the arrows of doubt, the arrows of criticism, self-criticism. And it's not that all self-criticism or all doubt or any of the other things that we create, anger or anything else, are bad or wrong. It's just that if we live that way, if we live in that, uh, and if we make things worse by indulging in that, that's on us. You know, if I have a bad ankle or lose a pet or somebody that I love, that's nothing I can do anything about. I mean, I can do something about the bad ankle because we have Western medicine, but doesn't mean it's going to get better, as I found out over the last year. When we have back pain and we have surgery, it doesn't mean it's necessarily going to get better, but we do our best. We all work with what we have. We do our best. But there's so much, the vast majority we cannot control. So at that point, we have a choice. And the choice is very simple. We can either practice with the situation, and I think most of you listening know what I'm talking about, how we do that, or we cannot, or we can indulge in the negative streams of karmic conditioned streams that we relied on earlier in our life that didn't work then and don't work now. We're talking about our adult life, not our childhood, which is a whole different issue. And I think all of you listening today are adults, right? I don't see any, I think any of us are children. We might act like children at times, but we aren't. So are we practicing with it? So if you don't know how to practice with it, and maybe you don't, that's what all this is about, learning how to practice with whatever's arising, learning how to practice with the first arrows and not shoot ourselves with the second, third, fourth, or 50th or 1000th arrow, if at all possible. All right. I thought this would be a good time to, I think this would be a good time to open it up